Anyway, without further ado, I guess I'll introduce you guys to our talk. So we're basically two wannabe hackers at the moment, hence the title. And we just thought we'd give you a quick walk through the Hack the Box box Waldo that we've decided to pick, and we've definitely learnt a lot. And we're going to apply the kill chain, which I think Natalie said you kind of went through a few weeks ago. So we're going to quickly do a refresher and then go into like more of the technical details about how to hack the box. So,
yeah. So just a little overview about our talk this evening. We'll do a little introduction about the Queens, how Security Queens was formed and all the background behind that. A really quick run through of the cyber kill chain. And then we're going to be applying the kill chain to a simulated attack. We wanted to show you kind of the application in a real life scenario. So we thought the best legal way to do this was to use a hack the box. So hopefully we can apply that. And it goes without saying, massive spoiler, if you haven't done this box before, you will know how to do it. But it is a retired box on the Hack the Box Labs. So even if you did do it now, I don't think you get any points, but yeah.
I definitely didn't get any points when I tried to do the Hack the Box, so yeah, can confirm that. It's a little bit about myself. I've just graduated from Bournemouth University this year, so I was studying forensic computing and security, and I'm now free and just started my new job over at NCC, so we're doing quite a lot of training at the moment. But whilst I was at uni, I got really into the security scene anyway, and started going to things like B-Sides London. So I went to the 2018 one, and then in 2019 I did my first ever talk, which was the rookie track talk, and I actually managed to win that, surprisingly, which was great fun because we got to go to Vienna, I think it was, and go to the DeepSec conference there. But from that, I thought that, well, I got really into it and I wanted to do another workshop. So I went to Glasgow Caledonian's first conference and presented my first workshop about how to program DigiSparks. So I just kind of did a walkthrough, a little branch off of talk that I did previously, and just taught people how to program them using the Arduino IDE, which was really fun. And it was sort of when I was doing the talk the first time I saw it. And then more of a personal note, I am a lover of foreign places. So that was actually the prize me there in Vienna when I got to go. But currently this year I have been exploring my sofa, and that has been about it. I haven't done much traveling, obviously, with COVID. So
yeah, I've got a pretty similar story to Sarah, really. Similarly, I've just graduated Bournemouth Uni this year, but I was on the cybersecurity management course, so that was kind of the non-technical managerial course. Did a lot of policies and business continuity, that kind of thing. But I too am now working for NCC Group. I worked with them on placement last year and was very fortunate to get a job offer from that. I was also on Channel 4's Hunted. If you watch that show, there's me staring into the abyss. I think that was like the second episode in. It's not as bad as the first episode where I'm in the background eating a sandwich. That was a great debut to national television. But in the meantime, I've won some stuff. This year I won Cybersecurity Student of the Year at the SC Awards, and lover of horses. I've been riding horses since I could walk, really, and lover of horsepower as well. So if you follow me on Twitter, I probably don't tweet anything security related anymore, really. It's just cars and drifting. So that's kind of my pastime other than security.
And without further ado, I guess we'll kind of talk through a little bit about how Security Queens was formed. So I actually met Sophia through uni, first off at this hacking society that we had, and she was the vice president. But Sec Queens and we all met at a conference, so it was B-Sides London 2019, and we decided to, well, we all got drunk and then bonded, basically. But in April, during lockdown, we decided to start up a blog, and so far I've written over 20 blog posts there. And pretty early on, we were nominated for the European Cybersecurity Blogger Awards and actually won Best New Up and Coming Blog, which was insane, which is really lucky for, as well as being interviewed by InfoSec magazine. And for some reason, someone's coined as a cybersecurity influencer, which I'm sure is not a thing. Like, I don't think, but Reddit, it's on Reddit, so it's got to be true.
Obviously, everything on the internet's true. Anyways, now we'll just do a really quick intro / run through to the cyber kill chain. It was a model developed by Lockheed Martin to basically help visualize the different stages of an attack. So there's 7 different stages within sort of a breach or an attack, and it's mostly applied to high-level kind of sophisticated attacks done by nation-state actors, APTs, that kind of thing. But in this particular instance, in this talk today, we're going to be applying it to a simulated attack, just to kind of demonstrate how and why this kind of model was created to help deepen your understanding about sort of an attacker's mindset or anything to do sort of like an offensive security methodology. So the first stage, which I think is probably one of the most important stages, is the recon stage. And it's kind of very self-explanatory. You just recon a bunch about your target. So you want to identify your target, you want to research as much as you can about it, scope any vulnerabilities that you can do. And it mostly includes things like network scanning, or maybe you want to run a vulnerability scanner. But I'd say it always starts with something called OSINT, which is open source intelligence. When I was on Hunted, before we've hacked all the fugitives, we'd literally spend like at least a full day or full 2 days just crawling through like Google search results and Facebook, trying to find as much as we can about the fugitives before we go about trying to hack them. I guess an example of this was I found out the name of one of the fugitives' dogs, and that was her password for her Instagram. So that kind of shows how important that recon phase is. The second phase is weaponization. Again, very self-explanatory. You want to create a weapon of some sort, like a virus or a Trojan, that you want to plant on your target. So this will be tailored to vulnerabilities that you identified in the previous phase, and is usually coupled with a backdoor of some sort. So you want to make it into some sort of deliverable payload, and there's loads of ways you can do this. You can either use a framework such as MSF Venom. You can get ready-made tools. So I know there's a massive sort of cybercrime economy on the dark web where people just buy random tools that you just launch against random stuff. Don't recommend that. Just kind of put that out there. Or you can write your own if you've got that knowledge as well. The next stage is delivery. So just deliver the payload. There's me delivering my most recent payload, obviously. But this may include things like emails and phishing, or dropping random USB sticks everywhere, setting up a malicious website, or kind of creating a malicious executable or download that runs when you open an email or go to a website, that kind of thing. And the next phase is exploitation. So this is where the fun begins. You want to break down those stores and exploit the target and get into that system. So this will be exploiting a vulnerability on the target system. And ideally you want to achieve some sort of remote code execution, or you want to gain access to that host. Yeah, so I think Sarah's going to run through some examples.
Yeah, definitely. So exploitation is a few different examples. They've got malware, SQL injection, like point and click exploits. And with, let's say, for example, point and click exploits, there's tons that you can use in Metasploit, if you guys have used that before, and they're all pre-packaged. So certain hosts or operating systems might be vulnerable to certain things, and you can go through and find them. Or like Sophia said before, if you have the ability to create your own, you can create your own. But yeah, that's basically exploitation, which kind of goes hand in hand with the installation phase. So once you've managed to get that access, you want to install something. Maybe it's like a remote access Trojan, or you want to get an interpreter shell to kind of have more control over the operating system, be able to deliver different kinds of commands, and you want to be able to get better access in general. So that kind of brings me on to the next phase, is when you have command and control. And when an attacker has command and control, it's not looking very good for you at this point. Basically, they now have that access in place from the installation phase to be able to do whatever they so want. So they can carry out their action on objectives. Oh, can't speak. So they can maybe they want to do something for financial gain. They want to gain access to your intellectual property. They might have other motivations, which might be political. We all heard about the Trump and Putin sort of rumors going on there. Who knows what happened? Maybe their initial access onto your host was because they want to gain further access. Certain air gap networks, for example, like will have more sensitive content further in the network, and then an employee might have just been fired, and he may just want to mess around with that organization, which obviously is terrible. But you need to have those controls in place to kind of prevent attackers, any kind of attacker, from doing bad things. Basically, is the most technical term to put it.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the offensive kind of side of the kill chain. So we're going to talk a little bit about the defensive actions you can take against these different stages of an attack. So the first offensive action you can do is detection. So determine whether an attacker is poking around. So maybe you can see some logs that they're scanning your system, there's a really dodgy sort of IP address visiting your website, that kind of thing. So being able to detect something that's not of the norm is sort of the best way to prevent, I guess. It's just kind of getting us that step ahead before they can even try hacking you, I suppose. The second defensive action is deny. So as I said, OSINT is a massive part of that initial recon phase, so preventing information disclosure, keeping private information private, and also denying any unauthorized access. So even if they do try to hack you, implementing stuff like AV or firewalls, IDS, IPS, anything like that, to try completely lock them out and make sure they don't actually get onto your system.
Yeah, and then you can, I mean, if they're on your system, you want to disrupt that connection, or, you know, change that traffic so that the IPs that you've detected that are in your system are blocked from then on. And another thing, which I briefly mentioned before, is you want to contain access within your network. So there's, when I said earlier about segmentation of your network, there might be different zones that you implement, especially as an organization, not necessarily at home. But if it was a company, they might have a demilitarized zone, an internet facing zone, and then you have like your internal zone where all your sensitive stuff is all kept and split by firewalls or proxies, and or both, you know, that's just mainly both. So yeah, there's lots of different things you can do to try and defend against the attacks.
Cool, so that was a really quick kind of run through of the kill chain if you didn't know beforehand, and hopefully if you did, it's a bit of a refresher. So now we're going to move on to sort of a red teamy offensive security demo. As I said, the best we could think of the best way to show you this was through Hack the Box, because you obviously don't want to be breaking the law or anything like that and showing you dodgy stuff, I guess. So we decided to just choose a Hack the Box and try to apply the stages of the kill chain against that methodology we used to break into this box. So it was a massive learning curve. There was a lot of stuff to this box that we learned about. So you initially have some web stuff, you got some Linux int stuff, restricted shell escape, Docker escape, all the way through to Linux priv-esque about getting that kind of root permissions, which we'll talk about in a bit. So the first stage, as I said, the very first stage is recon. I think I briefly mentioned it, that usually your go-to if you're in an offensive security position is to start doing some sort of scan to identify a target and see what's running on that target. So in this instance, I used Nmap, which I suppose is a really popular go-to port scanner. And what this does, it helps you identify the ports and the services running on the host. So using Linux, you just literally put Nmap in your terminal, and I use the -scv flag. So this will run a basic script scan. Nmap has a bunch of sort of default scripts that it can run against a host to try find out more information about services. And this also runs a version scan. So it will try to detect the version of these services running on the host. So this is really good if you can find out if there's any out of date services running, there might be some vulnerabilities, that kind of thing. The super verbose option. So if you ever run an Nmap scan without these flags, you'll just be staring at kind of a blank terminal until it's done. So the really good thing about using this extra verbose option is it will give you information as it's finding stuff or erroring. So it gives you something to work on instead of kind of staring at a terminal for God knows how long, which I've done in the past, so I learned that the hard way. -p-, which is all ports. So instead of scanning the top 1,000 most popular ports, this will scan 0 all the way through to 65535. Your target, obviously. And it's really good practice to create some sort of output file of your scan. So the -OA option creates 3 different outputs. It's an XML, an Nmap, and a graphical Nmap file. And that just saves you, well, in case you want to look back at the results, you don't have to rerun the scan, or if the scan fails halfway through, you can actually use that file to pick up the scan where it failed from. So it's just good practice, especially if you're going into sort of pen testing. I think mostly everyone I know that works in it tends to save their results and literally document everything. And this is what we get. So it's not much, to be fair. There's only 3 things on this box that we can see from the Nmap. So SSH, pretty standard for any hack the box really. This is kind of just for remote access. You've got a web app running on ATTCP, which is HTTP. And you've got some weird filtered unknown 8888 service, which will make more sense in the future, a bit of foreshadowing. So what stands out to me when I look at this scan is obviously the web app. So as with any web app, just go and visit it, have a look, have a snoop around. What does it do? What can you, is there anything you can play around with? Is there anything you can kind of poke at? You're looking for like low-hanging fruit that you can try sort of twist and exploit in a way. So it reveals a website. It redirects you to this list.html, and it kind of does what it says. It manages lists. It's nothing really that interesting. You can create lists, you can delete lists, you can add, edit lists. So you can do whatever you want really list-wise. So now we kind of know what the website does. We want to delve into that a little bit deeper. So we're going to use a tool called Burp. So a little bit of run through on what is Burp if you haven't heard of it before. So Burp is an interception tool that allows you to kind of interrupt the connections between the client and the web server. So let's say I wanted to visit a particular page on a website. I'd click that button or try to go to that page, and what Burp will do, it will grab that request for me and hold it for me so I can have a deeper look into it, what's actually being requested, what kind of stuff's going on in the background. I could even play around with it before sending it onto the web server. But Burp is really good because you can fuzz functionality. It's got so many like different things it can do. You can investigate functionality. So as I said, when you grab that request, you can see what's happening sort of behind the scenes, I suppose. And it's an awesome web hacking tool. I'd say it's in my top 5, I guess, for offensive security / mad hacks. So definitely great tool. If you haven't used it before, I actually wrote a blog on it on our Security Queens website, so feel free to have a look at that. Or there's loads of like tutorials and stuff online anyways. So we now use Burp, and we do what we did before, investigating the website, but now we're going to proxy it through our Burp tool to have a closer look at all the requests and functions going on in the website. So basically, hopefully you can see this, we've got our Burp running. We're going to turn the intercept on, and then we're going to do what we did by clicking random stuff and see what happens. So you can see there's a file read.php, which is quite interesting. So we're going to send that to repeater, save that for a rainy day. And then we can see there's a dir.read.php. So again, seems pretty interesting. Send that to the repeater tab and save that for a rainy day. So when we intercept the connections, when we send it to the repeater tab, basically we can continually play with that request and send it to the server without having to recapture the request. Hopefully that makes sense. Feel free to ask me if it doesn't make sense. But what's really interesting is we've identified these 2 interesting functions. So there's dir read.php, which happens when you try to click on the list, or yeah, I think so. One of the 2. Either click on the list or click on home. And this helps you view the list contents. And I noticed in the request, it actually specifies a path. So this got me thinking, okay, how about some form of local file inclusion? So that's exactly what I did. I changed the, if you see on line 12, I changed the path variable just to a /, and I can now see all the contents of the web root of that application. So I'm like, excellent. This is vulnerable to local file inclusion. And basically this vulnerability is what it says. You're just including files that you're not really supposed to see, but you can see. So as with all local file inclusion, this also got me thinking if I could do something called directory traversal. So with local file inclusion, you're just kind of trying to see files within your immediate vicinity, I suppose. With directory traversal, you're trying to get out of directories and kind of move around different directories on the host and then viewing files from those. So you can use this like weird looking syntax, which is like the // which is one of many ways you can kind of try for directory traversal. And eventually when I put enough // and it literally took me forever to trial and error this, you can see that we're actually able to see the root of the host. So we've got like the bin folder, we've got home, mount, root, and we kind of got some weird access, not access, but we're able to see what's on the host. More foreshadowing about this box. But what's mostly interesting is the home directory to me, because it's a good way to enumerate the users on the box, or to kind of get an idea of what kind of users are on that box. So we kind of view this home directory, and there's a user called nobody. We go into nobody's directory and we're seeing kind of some interesting stuff. We've got some sort of history. We've got the user flag, some Vim info. Not a fan of Vim, but I won't start World War III. So, but what's most interesting to me is this .ssh folder. So in any kind of Linux users .ssh folder, you're going to find some interesting stuff. Usually you'd find things like authorized keys, so who's allowed to SSH in, that kind of thing. You might have the public key, you have known hosts, but most importantly, you might be lucky and you might actually have a private key for that user. So I recognize authorized keys and known hosts. Those are quite common things to have in a .ssh directory. But this .monitor, I was like, don't really know what that is. We're going to have a look at it. So this is when we kind of use the file read.php. So we use that really weird // We go all the way through to the .ssh, and now we're viewing the file monitor, which is an RSA key, which is like what we like to see. So we copy and paste this response, and it doesn't look right at all. I'm like, this isn't a key. I don't know what's going on here. But actually a little bit of Googling shows it's just a JSON response. So it is a key. Panic diverted. Literally just put it in a tool kind of thing. Took out all the weird spaces and characters for me. And we've got an SSH key. So this is kind of the phase where we've done our exploitation. We've gone into the website. We've exploited some vulnerabilities within that website. There's not really a need to weaponize or deliver anything in this instance, because we've exploited it in a way that we've actually managed to grab something that we can use to access the box straight away.
Yeah, so basically we want to go ahead and just access this box now we have this key. So all you need to do is use, like we saw earlier in the Nmap scan, SSH, and use the key and the user that we know about from initially doing our recon. So we do SSH-I, and -I is just specifying an identity file. So the way we want to authenticate, which is with the key, and we want to be the user nobody at our target, so 10.10.10.87. And once we do that, we are into the box, and we can see here we've captured our flag. But yeah, as far as you say, we're in the box, but we're not quite in the box yet. We have to do a few more things before we get onto the box. So as we go through that, we can kind of do, oh, yeah, sorry about this. If we do have this, if we're at this point and we're in the box, certain times, or if you're following the kill chain, you might want to do some installation and command and control here, so you can go further and, you know, install your backdoors and get the persistent access. And a fun little anecdote is Sophia did use tools like Cobalt Strike on Hunted to try and do things like this, but it's not necessary for this kind of exploit. It's just to hack the box, so we don't really need to set up all of these attacks. Instead, we can just go ahead and continue trying to find what we really want, which is our flag. So when we are in this box, we want to do a little bit of enumeration, try and find out what kind of environment we're in, and we are in a Docker environment. So if we remember previously when Sophia was doing her web reconnaissance, we saw that .docker env file, which is just a file that's used to define variables in the environment. This was actually blank, but why would it be there if it wasn't a Docker environment? And if you don't know what Docker is just a containerization software. So if we imagine we've got our Windows operating system, classic or Linux or whatever operating system is of your choice, we have that. Docker will just containerize a completely different operating system of your choice. And shameless plug, because Sophia plugged her blog post, I'll plug my blog post. I have done a quick tutorial blog post about Docker over on the blog. So if you wanted to look a little bit more in depth, it's just one small part about the whole of Docker. One small part of the whole of Docker. So yeah, it's an interesting read if you want to do that. But yeah, so we know we're in a Docker environment. Now we want to get the flag, so we need to do a bit more recon. A really good tool which we were allowed to run was NetStat, which is just network statistics. And here we're looking at all the listening connections, but there'll be other sort of other options that will bring up if we're not just scrapping for listening connections. You can look at established connections if there are any, etc. But here we're just seeing the local address here. So the home address is set up to listen on 8888, which is interesting because we saw that on our scan before, and it's set up to have a connection that listens for local addresses again on any port, but from other addresses on the box, I guess is the best way to explain it. So we wonder what the port 888 is, and if it's a connection, then maybe it's SSH. So we can check the SSH config to see and try and confirm that that is what's been set up, and lo and behold, it is port 8888 there. So we know that we can use SSH again, because we've already used it to go SSH in, it's got the config files, and try and connect to something on port 8888. And furthermore, we know that there's that .ssh file there, so we can go back into that and look at more of the files, look into the files a bit more, and we can cat authorized keys, for example. And this is showing us that there's another user called monitor. And if we kind of make the connection, we know that that user monitor and that private key .monitor might go a little bit hand in hand. So we can try an SSH again. So if we go through and use the SSH-I .monitor, so the same file, whilst we're in this container as monitor at the target, then we can get another shell, which is brilliant. This is what we want. Now we need to kind of figure out what we're looking at here. And just a little diagram, because I love my diagrams, just summarizes what we've done here. So we are the little devil that is on your shoulder, so the tracking machine, and we've just tried to SSH in. We've SSH into a Docker container, and then we've SSH out of that container, broken out of it, and we are posing as them. We're posing as monitor, so we can see what we can do on this.
Cool. Yeah, so now we're the lovely angel, or so we think, but actually we're still in a restricted shell. So even though we've managed to SSH as monitor, we can't do anything. I tried to sort of get my ID, change directory, and everything's restricted. We're in some sort of restricted environment. So a little tip / hack, if you feel like you are in a restricted environment and you have LS at least, just do an LS bin, and that will show you what things you can use within that environment. So we couldn't do much. We had LS, most, red and rnano, but I just knew this kind of by chance because I'd done it before and have a little cheat sheet. You can actually use red to escape a restricted shell. So I will show you here. So we've got a shell, we can't change directory, we can LS, or LS bin to see what we can do. And then we use red and this neat little bin bash one-liner. And then that escapes the shell for us. So we can see we've got an actual functioning shell that we can work with rather than not being able to do anything. Oh, there we go. So we've got a shell, which is good, and we've got a proper shell. So now we want to do the action on carry on doing the action on objectives. So we want to do even more enumeration. We're still set on getting that root flag, and this took me quite a while, a lot of Googling, a lot of different checklists, but there's actually something called Linux capabilities that might be able to help you on your journey to root. So Linux capabilities are basically attributes within Linux that grant processes and executables specific privileges that are usually just reserved for root. So it's a lot of fancy word than that, but TLDR is you can execute stuff as root when you're not root. So to find in its capabilities, you can use something called getCap, and by doing an ls-ls spin, we find that we actually do have this getCap executable. So we do this neat little one-liner, this getCap -r to dev-null, and that will reveal everything on the box that has Linux capabilities. So we've got some sort of log monitor software, but most interestingly, we've got this TAC executable. What TAC does, it just cat but backwards, it reads files backwards. Didn't know that until this box. I was like, that's kind of pointless to have if you can cat something. Why would you TAC it? I don't know. So we can see it's been assigned this attribute capdac read search plus EI, which absolutely made no sense to me whatsoever. So again, more giggling needed when I got this, but it's kind of just it bypasses file and directory read permissions and basically runs with privileged access. So I was like, sweet, that means we can use it for something like getting the Etsy shadow but backwards. So a good check to see if you've got some kind of root read permissions or some sort of root permissions. Try get the Etsy shadow, because that should only be readable by root. It's not always only readable by root, but it should be. So if you're able to get that, that kind of shows that, okay, I've got some sort of root privilege here that I can sort of play around with. But because it's a hack the box, and you could absolutely crack the passwords in Etsy shadow, you could find some root SSH keys. Because it's a hack the box, we just want that root.txt really. So we can use TAC to get that root/root.txt, and in hack the box's eyes, we've solved it. So again, you could absolutely go down the rabbit hole by using this kind of capability, vulnerability, just to get sort of crack the passwords or try find more interesting stuff. But we thought we end it here before it got too complicated.
You've got to include the meme at the end. We were actually successful in this end, like finally victory was ours. So yeah, no, brilliant. What Sophia said, exactly, you want to try and just find as much, all of the things out if you're doing this in a proper pen test, and just as much information, see what else is on the box. So yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty simple interpretation and application of the kill chain. We kind of ummed and ahed about how we could sort of demo something that wasn't dodgy and or illegal. So that's kind of why we settled for Hack the Box, because we found it's a really good platform just to sort of demonstrate educational kind of things. The kill chain, as I said, is mostly applied to kind of high level complex attacks like nation state actors and APTs, which literally have like a million and different things happening in their attack. So the kill chain is really good in simplifying complex attacks, but hopefully by applying it to kind of this more simplified, sort of simple simulated attack, you can kind of see the reasoning behind why this model was created and why it's important to understand when do you kind of want to be in the position of an attacker and understand their mindset and their methodology. And it's always good to learn the theory behind the practical. It's great if you can get all the root and get all the passwords, but if you don't really understand what you're doing, it's not going to help you in the long run. So it's always good to learn kind of the theory behind that as well.
Yeah, and I guess just a thank you from us, because it's an absolute honour to be able to talk at the Ladies Hacking Society. It's insane. I always wanted to go to the London one when I used to live there, and I never managed to get to it. And like now I'm talking at it, it just seems a little bit mad. So it's very, very cool. And if you guys have any questions, please just feel free to ask us anything you were we were a bit iffy in explaining, or anything else that you want to know about, whatever, then go ahead and ask us. So yeah, thank you.